Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 2, week number 2 of the new series, Talking Tobacco. It's going to be a pretty basic episode today. I just thought of a few helpful resources. You don't even have to collect the set, honestly, to use these or to enjoy these. It's just 3 helpful resources for you. These are some awesome ways to help learn about the set. Even if you don't collect it, you can learn why the set is so special. So we have a podcast that you can check out and listen to. There's a website you can go through and kind of read a bunch of documents. There's also an app on your phone that's very helpful. So I'm just going to share those with you guys. And then I'll also talk a little bit about the different variations of the fronts of players. So how players have multiple different cards within the set. So I'll go over a little bit of that, kind of the portraits versus the action shots. And that'll be it for today. Stay tuned. So the first and probably most important resource that you're going to want to check out if you're a fan of this set is going to be Keith Olbermann's podcast. If you don't know who he is one of the biggest collectors in all of sports cards. He has just an insane collection, multiple Hannes Wagners, every card you can imagine. And so he has an insane amount of knowledge. He's been doing it for a long time. And he has a podcast with some of his friends who also have been doing it for a really long time. That's called The Monster, referring to the T206 set. And it has a whole bunch of useful information in there. They made it about 2019 or 2020, I believe, right about when the pandemic was happening. And there's a whole lot of awesome tips, just insane knowledge that you're not going to get here and you're not going to get anywhere else on YouTube. So make sure to check that out, because there's just a whole bunch of crazy information there. He actually has his own website for this podcast. It's just themonsterpodcast.com. I'll leave a link to it below. There's 12 episodes that they made, and they're about an hour each, just loaded with information, absolutely packed, and a whole lot to absorb. Definitely worth listening 2 or 3 times if you even get the chance to. The second resource that you're going to want to check out is this website here, OldCardBoard.com. They have an awesome guide here that I've been reading through. I haven't got all the way through, but I've read a good chunk of it. And it has an article titled Inside T206, a collector's guide to the classic baseball card set. I learned a lot here about kind of when it takes you through the production process of the cards. It's just got 83 pages of information, so there's endless stuff that you can go through. Got the distribution timeline, kind of tells you what cards are possible with what backs. It goes through, all the Southern Leaguers. There's some information. It also has some information on some of the rarer cards in the set. Some of the ones that are tough to find, like the Maggi, the Plank, Wagner, O'Hara, and some of the other really tough cards. Goes over some of the printing proofs. It's just a whole lot of information, so make sure you go ahead, check it out, read all of it. It's a good read. It'll probably take you a couple hours, but definitely worth it. The third thing you're going to want to have if you're collecting T206s is an app that you may already have. It's going to be the PSA app. You're going to want to have this. It's super helpful for checking pop reports, especially if you're collecting off backs or any rarer back variations. You can just check out the population and see just how rare it is. Some players may be rarer in a sovereign back versus an old mill back, and it gets super complicated sometimes. So the best way to help you is to have a PSA pop report app. You can just pull up the card that you're looking for, and it makes it real easy to check and see just how many of those there are. Now, I said I'd talk a little bit about the variations, the different images on the front of the card. So let's go ahead and get into that. If you're watching this, you probably already know there is different kind of images for each player. You can have a portrait image like this, where it's kind of a close-up still shot of the player showing kind of their chest and up. You can have the portrait like that, or you can have kind of an action shot or whatever you want to call it, just not as close up on their face. So most players, I would say, have 2 different cards in the set. Here, like Roger Bresnahan, he's got 2 different cards. So these are the only 2 fronts you will see for Roger Bresnahan. But that is not the same for every player. There is exceptions to every rule. There's players who only have 1 card in the set. Most players have between 2 to 4, I would say. There's a couple players who have 5, but most, I would say, are between 2 and 4. So pretty standard. Like Bresnahan, you have the portrait and then the action shot. And then, like I said, guys like Hannes Wagner and Eddie Plank, they both only have the 1 card. That's their portrait. Hal Chase actually has 5 different cards. That's the most, I believe, for any player. I think there's some people maybe that tie him. I'm not sure on that, but I know Hal Chase has 5, and that's at least tied for the most of any player. Ty Cobb actually has 4. I think he's the only player that has multiple portrait images, I think. He has the red portrait and the green. On top of having 2 portraits, he also has 2 of the action shots as well. So he's got one with the bat on his shoulder and one with the bat off his shoulder. And so there's a whole lot of different variations that you can collect. This can get pretty complicated, so the easiest way to do it, or just kind of a general rule of thumb, this probably isn't always the case, but a general rule of thumb is that the portraits go for slightly more. They're slightly more desired just because they're in action shot. You can kind of see the player's face, see what they looked like. Now, this doesn't really mean they're any more rare. They're not. They're usually about the same in pop counts if you kind of look all of them up. But the portraits do seem to carry a little bit of a premium. So if you really are looking for value-wise, I guess, go for the portraits. That's what I personally like. I like being able to see the player's kind of close-up face. It doesn't really matter. You can kind of buy whatever you like. But that's going to be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to check out those helpful resources in the description below, the ones I talked about earlier. Other than that, make sure to stay tuned for next week's video, and I'll see you guys then.